Hi, everyone. Welcome to Talking Tech with Creative Podcast. That is a podcast where we look at the intersection of technology and creativity. It's a very exciting one today. I've got an amazing guest, Sandra Johnson. Before I take it to Sandra Johnson, I just wanted to do an update on technology as I always try to do each week. We're quite near the end, I think. We've got only a few days to the end of the AI and copyright consultation that the government is doing. I've tried as much as possible to encourage people to go in and put in their what they think. Even people have been encouraged to actually write to their MPs as well. MP are members of parliament in the UK, because the idea is that if you're a creative, you want to have a say in any policy that is going on with AI and copyright, because the government are recommending, I keep repeating it, if you would have heard it previously from before, but if you're a new person to this podcast, the government, UK government, want to recommend that the AI companies who want to use work that is available out there, to get them to maybe bypass copyright to get the information to train the AI technology, which is, we call them the large language models. And there's a lot of issues around that, because what they've said is that the owners, when the technology company wants to do that training, you opt in or you opt out. But the problem is, if you have 10, 20, 30 technology company, anybody that you don't know about, who says, okay, we're going to take it, we want to use your work, and you don't even know they exist, then it's a bit difficult for you to say whether you want to do that or not. Now, we have two camps in the creative world: those who are very keen on AI and those who completely cannot stand it. So there's two camps of people. So it's very important that people have their say about what happens in the future, because that's going to have an impact. Other than that, when I spoke to Gendela Benson, we talked a lot about technology, social media, digital technology. And one of the things that we said was, and I said that, was that the AI tool that we're talking about is generative AI. That's the one, ChatGPT and Gemini and all the other AI technology out there. They're the generative AI. AI itself, as a technology, will be making quite a lot of impact in other worlds. So it will have a lot of good use cases in healthcare. It's going to have a lot of use cases even in emerging countries, because, for example, there's a platform that is trying to develop 2,000 languages, languages that are not known, that you might not even have heard of, especially somewhere like Nigeria has about 200 and over 200 ethnic languages. So they might take maybe the major languages in Nigeria, but what they're trying to do is that those languages would at least live on when, if, and you can read text in those languages. So you can see that is a very useful one. I studied linguistics and African languages as my first degree. So I find that quite exciting that you could do something like that. Conversely, if you had a nice voice and you wanted to license your voice, there's another company called 11 Labs who use AI tools for audio narration. Now, the people that are audio narrators, human narrators, might feel that will take away from them, but not everybody wants it. And especially the AI tools now, especially with inflection and intonation, you're not going to sound human. So you are going to be premium when it comes to narration. But yes, that's happening. So when there's no getting away from this, so I advise you, however, whichever camp you belong to, just try to educate yourself, try to speak to people, because have your voice, and so that we can be invited to the table, so that we can influence the policies. There's no need grumbling in the back and nothing is happening, and these technology companies are just giving us what they want. So we want them to be able to consult us. So that's my speak for this week in terms of that. Without further ado, I'm introducing Sandra Johnson. Sandra, we're going to be discussing career strategy. especially knowing what the future holds, which I have no idea, but the future of career will be different. Sandra has a long career, and she's going to tell us a bit about what she's done in terms of personal, she's a coaching. She's a coach and she's done so many things. So welcome to the podcast, Sandra. It's lovely to have you. I'm quite excited. And I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself, how you started, because I know you worked in Whitehall.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about yourself, Sandra.
Yes, I have had an unusual past. I'm second generation Windrush. My parents came here from the Caribbean to work in the jobs that many people didn't want to do. And one of the things growing up, being born here, was education. So I'm one of 9 children. I'm the first in my family to have a higher level education, which I got by night study. My family was too poor for me to go to university. My first degree was done at night, 5 years night study while working as a PA. And then when I got better jobs, I was sponsored to do my master's, and then I became a fellow of the Chartered Management Institute. So growing up in South London, I was exposed to many diverse cultures and perspectives and challenges. And it did teach me about how to become adaptable and perseverance. That would later become a superpower for when I entered Whitehall. So that's me and how I started. And then I went from local government into what they call Quango, the Equality and Human Rights Commission. I was there for 6 years. And then I was headhunted to Department of Business. And throughout these jobs, I was just picking up skills, learning and picking up skills the whole time. And I was trailblazing at that time because there were not many Black women doing policy and communication roles. And here I was at the Equality and Human Rights Commission, talking about policy, bringing stakeholders together, looking at government inquiries, looking at legislation. That was really, you just talked about legislation and how the power of voice. I was helping to write legislation. And that gave me a voice beyond my community.
So that's leadership. So I just want to go back to you growing up, because that is amazing. The fact that you did your study, night study, and you were working to get your degree. So you were very driven. So at that time that this was going on, what encouraged you to go?
I think one of the things is you see your parents working hard, like many immigrant children. Parents come here for a better life and they want you to have a better life. They want you to have more than what they had. And one of the things that motivated me was the fact that my parents traveled so far from the Caribbean to be here. I was not going to waste the opportunity of education. So even though we could not traditionally go straight to university, the family needed money. And in our culture, the elders help the younger ones to come up. So everybody has to go to work. I wasn't going to give up the opportunity of getting a degree. And so through going and doing that, being the first in my family, the first in my community at that time, I'm in my 50s. And at that time, Black men and women from my background didn't go to university, not Caribbean. It was more West Africans who came here and their parents were already educated. But my parents were not. My mother came here to be an auxiliary nurse. She did cleaning. My father opened up a shop. And I just thought, I'm going to do more because they're here giving me this opportunity. So that persevered me. That made me just go harder and faster, study at night for 5 long years to get that degree. But the skills I picked up from my life was made me have a very successful career at Whitehall and be headhunted into the private sector.
I still see a resilience there. That's like, I know you said, I still want to know, what was your driving? Was it your parents working so hard?
Yeah.
Or was it because was it the school environment? What was it exactly that made it that this
I
is,
think
I really want, I want this?
I love that, Stella. And I knew you said you're going to go off the questions and love that. At the time Stephen Lawrence died, he was killed at a bus stop. And when you're growing up in those times and you hear about Black people being killed as they were back then, Enoch Powell said, when the West Indians were coming over as part of Windrush, it will be rivers of blood. And it was when we came, our parents came. They had to literally fight for their survival. So I was growing up as a child in the 70s, in very turbulent times. You have the civil rights movement in America. We had civil rights going on here, but we didn't have legislation at that time, not robust legislation. And it was a lot of the Caribbean that were rioting, the Brixton riots, Toxie riots. All of this unrest was going on politically. And as a child and growing up in that environment, you couldn't, I don't think, fail to be impacted. And seeing the poverty that many immigrants were within, not giving housing at the time, it was no blacks, no Irish on the door. And you couldn't get housing. We had to club together, my parents, and throw what they call partner, put money together to get their first rent or to get their first property. And it was very hostile environments. And that gave me the resilience to fight, to make sure I get a job and I study. And what kept me going on in the rain and the cold to go from a full-time job to the University of Westminster and do 2-3 hours in the nights and then walk to Charing Cross Station from Regent Street to save money was that environment that I was growing up in. And I just knew that if I could do these 5 years and get that degree, and I got my BA social science degree, I could make a difference to not just my life, but also to my parents' lives.
That is so touching. That is amazing. I'm just going to go off track a little bit. I'm going to go off track because this will be what I'll be asking at the end, but I'm not going to ask it at the end. I'm going to ask about it now because you've talked about how you grew up and things you faced and the resilience that you developed from there. When we compare that to what is going on now, because there's almost, like a parallel going on of things going on. And some of them are not necessarily the best things. Some are better. So what is your position now on, number one, education? Number two, on the younger ones that are going up? What do you think about that when you compare that to how you were, the resilience you developed at that time? Do you think that, I don't know,
I think it's a lot of younger people. So I have a son, he's graduated, he's gone to went to university. I always said to him, I went at night so you could go in the day. And I do think a lot of it is parental influence. And even though I'm a divorcee, I raised him as a single parent. His father was very much in his life. So there was still two parents there. And I think what's happened a lot of times, especially with the Black community, we have a lot of single parent households. One of the beauties of working in the Equality and Human Rights Commission for 6 years is that I was exposed to so much statistics and policy. And you saw that African Caribbeans head up, I think it's 60 or 70% of the single parent households. We have the highest number. So in our community, and I talk about African Caribbean community, there are a lot of division in families. One could argue that's a legacy of racism and slavery, but there is. And we need to work together more as a community to make sure that the young people understand the importance of education. Because sometimes it's very easy to be distracted. And I think growing up as I did, I saw my parents coming in doing 2-3 jobs, all of this thing. And I saw what was happening to young people locally, young boys being arrested, the sus laws, they used to call it, where police could just pick you up for no reason at those times. They didn't have cameras on their helmets then. George Floyd happened all the time before it actually happened in the States. This was going on. So it made me want to fight, but not with my fist, but with my brain. I always say to my son, the pen is mightier than the sword. And I'm just wondering what young people are being taught today. And do we have that intergenerational experience where they understand what people have been through for them to have the platform that they stand on today and to have the opportunities that they have? Because many of the Black people that are the third generation, their parents are immigrants, their grandparents are immigrants, and they've never had the opportunity that they've had. So one of the things that was very grounding for me was that my mother always spoke about the sacrifices and the opportunities. And she made me realize how important it was to make the most of everything. She said it before Tony Blair said it in his speeches, and I researched speeches for a living when I was in Whitehall, but he said education. My mother was saying that every day to us growing up before any politician did. And I have a sister who's a scientist today. I have sisters who are teachers. Everybody's gone on and grasped that education nettle because it's there. And I wonder how young people are being spoken to about this. And it's something I've taught my son, and it doesn't have to cost you. You can grow in a comprehensive school and reach the top. I've advised ministers. I've traveled. I've been head of India for the government. I have been there from my background growing up in social housing. So it's possible.
Fantastic. So, career path, yeah, because this is your expertise.
Yes.
Well, how do people, because we've talked about education, how important it is.
Oh,
For me, education can be there's so many ways, so many formats and so many ways that you can get educated, because I know you could go through the university route. You can still learn, like in the UK, for example, you have apprenticeship where people can go through apprenticeship,
yeah.
work their way through and get educated in the process. So education comes in many ways
Mm.
that you can learn, because people learn in different ways. For me, my father used to say education was my meal ticket. He was right. Anyway, so career paths. I want to talk about career paths. So
Wow.
you're in school, for example, and I know
Yeah.
that they have to go and get their career coach, talk to them.
Mm.
When I was young, I didn't even know what I wanted to do. But the funniest thing was that I was so obsessed. I was always obsessed with reading, and I should have just followed that path. I still follow the same path. So
Yeah.
you go through the career route. What is your advice to those either starting out or somewhere in how they manage their career? What do you do? Because in being intentional,
Wow.
but when I talk about myself, I was not intentional at all, but I still manage my roots. But how do you become intentional about your career?
You have to be strategic, and there are so many pathways. So, for example, not everybody has to go to university. Being an entrepreneur is a career path. The apprenticeship route is a career path, internship. The reason I like university, and I say this not to be snobby about it, is because it gives you different skills in addition to learning. It teaches you how to get on with people, to train with people, to work on problem solving together. It's actually a very good precursor to going into the world of work, which is all about that. Whether you work for yourself or you work for somebody else, you're going to have to learn how to work as a team. The university for me is actually not about getting a honors degree. It's about the whole experience of going to university. And I think if you're in an underrepresented group, if you can take on as many skills as possible, take them on. And if you're young and you can go to uni and get that experience, that exposure. When my son was studying in Southampton, he met people he never would have met before from all over the UK. This is a very good exposure as well. And being in halls of residence or whatever, and learning to sort of transition into independent living. So I think all of those skills are really valuable. The apprenticeship route is also valuable because you don't have to incur that debt, because obviously university comes with debts and not everybody gets a job at the end of it. So a lot of people are saying, I don't want that. I just want to go out and work. And I love that apprenticeship route because it's also about acquiring skills, but learning from masters. And that's how it used to be in the olden days. People went into apprenticeship much more than they did at university. And they learned a trade and they learned very valuable skills. So we do need to have those apprentices. Not everybody wants to do academic study. I get that. And the other route you can look at is internships. And my son did that when he left university, but you can do an internship before academic study as a way of going into work. So I think there are many ways to explore what your next goals are, but be intentional. And one of the things I've always said, and during COVID, a lot of young people dropped out of education. And my son held the course because he did something he enjoyed doing. And he actually even changed his course from business and marketing to music management because he loves music.
Lovely. I
But
love that.
yeah, but he kept going during COVID because he loved what he was studying. A lot of children are coerced to study medicine or law or whatever, traditional things. Because one thing with immigrant children, there's sometimes a lot more pressure put on them to do even better than their parents or do it just as well as their parents. And so they feel they have to do career choices that they're not really that interested in. When pandemic hit that nobody saw coming, a lot of young people voted with their feet and left. And my son's class, when we graduated, there were so many young boys running up and down the road, wishing him well, who had dropped out of university, but they were proud to see him in his robes. And he was doing that, crossing that stage for them, because not everybody made it through. And a lot of young people didn't. Just drop.
Yeah.
So find something you love to do, really love, but sometimes you can't always make a living from that. So like you talked about, Stella, before this podcast, you talked about your love of books. Mine was too, but I could never become a writer. I couldn't help to support my family with writing. But I did that through policy and communications. I learned to write there. You talked about becoming a technical writer because of your love of writing. So there's ways that you can mix and blend your passion into a job. My son loves music. He has a podcast on Spotify, but he also works in PR now. So he helps to do public relations and marketing, but he does his music still on the side. But he said, Mummy, I'm not able to get a living from that. And he's practical about that. So sometimes you could combine a job with your passion until you're able to support your passion full time. And or you find a job that has a link, a tangential link, like my son, PR. He loves PR. He loves marketing, but he also loves music. So he's not able to do PR marketing, but he's doing PR and he's able to give a good service because he loves what he does. So find a passion and try and link it to a job. If you're good with your hands, it might be that you look at something practical to do because you like using your hands. And there are many electricians and plumbers that have said to me, I just knew academia, and they're academic because to do what they do, they have to study, but they wanted to work with their hands. I wanted to write. I wanted to talk. And so I did policy and communications. So there are ways that you can find that voice within and find a career route for that.
And even to add to it, I actually have a friend who I don't think he's with that. I think he's neurodivergent. He's
Mhm,
absolutely brilliant. But when it comes to technology,
mhm.
computer, all that, he's very bad at it. Even writing is bad at it, but he's a genius. So what we're saying is that nowadays this is why we have talking to with creatives and we have all technology going on. So even if you felt that, oh, school was not for me because I cannot think that way, because there's a certain way that you have to, academia is that way. There's so many ways that people can learn. So many, the technology is out there now for you to learn to anything you want to learn. And you can do audio. Because I remember her telling him, I said, look, there's audio now. You don't have to write. There's things that will translate for you. So
Yeah,
the world is your oyster.
100%. And I think that,
You can learn from every. Mm,
and when we talk about academia, there's so many academic courses. We tend to think of those traditional routes like medicine, law, and everything.
yes.
Like I said, my son did music management, which was an academic course. He had to study history of music and PR and marketing around that. So there are many different courses, and don't listen to what the press say. Oh my God, these useless degrees. If you're learning something and you've applied yourself and you come out with a good degree subject, a good mark, what you do show an employer is that you're resilient. You can take teaching. You know how to work on a problem and solve it. And employers, and I've now hired people on this side of the fence when I've been a senior manager and head of in Whitehall. I'm looking for somebody who has applied themselves to something. And I've often taken people without experience in this area that I'm looking for because I've seen their passion about something else.
Yeah. And I want to talk about soft skills because I know they've talked about that a lot. So how do people, because some people might say, oh, I'm not naturally, for me, I'm a natural talker, even from, I didn't care whether I had a Nigerian accent or not. I just hear my voice. Yeah. But so I don't even think that naturally my soft skills came, but I was quite good at making friends and take it from there. So how do people develop their soft skills? And let's talk about soft skills. Let's explain what is required in terms of soft skills.
And that's really opposite because I'm not promoting anything, but I have a free download on soft skills on my page, which Stella,
Sorry.
I'm sure you'll
Sorry.
share with them afterwards. And the reason I did that as a free download because it's such a necessary skill base for any job, anything that you do. And when we talk about that, we talk about communication. We talk about listening skills because that's also a soft skill. How you listen. So I'm listening to you, Stella, and I'm not just looking to interrupt. I'm listening to what you're saying so we can have a communication, a conversation going back and forth. I've taken on board what you said to me before this podcast started about your own technical writing and inculcated that so I understand who you are as a person as well. So soft skills is about two-way conversation, two-way listening. It's about actually applying some judgment, emotional intelligence to a situation. And I've been an assessor for the government for many years as well. So I've left Whitehall, but I assess for the government commercial function. And one of the things that they always want me to look at is leadership and judgment. So when the government who buy and spend billions of pounds on things, they want you to be able to make an assessment, not just on the pounds and pence, but what are the issues here? Is this the right supplier? We all see what goes wrong when we had the PPE scandals during COVID. Government want to get that right. And they have these very strict assessment centers now for people entering the commercial profession. And they need to know that you haven't just got technical skills, you have soft skills. You know how to talk to suppliers. You know how to solve a problem. You know how to get stakeholders together and listen to them. And all of this is really important now in the workplace because it's not, and many performance management frameworks now, and I've seen this in the private sector, it's not just what you've achieved, but how you got there. So if you win and you win ugly by being horrible to people, not listening, being rude, stealing people's ideas, claiming work that's not yours, you will not get a high performance marking, even if you've achieved that project. And I think that's one of the great things that have come in now. People understand you need different skills. It's not just technical brilliance. There's a lot of people who are very brilliant and very clever, but they might not be very nice. They may be a disruptor of a team. They may be a bully. And all of this, you need soft skills. So do look at my free download. That's not selling anything. That's just completely free because I do think it's the bedrock of anybody's job.
Well, give us one tip, at least for those listening, in terms of one tip. The rest,
Absolutely. One of the things I would say is active listening.
okay.
So while you've been talking, Stella, I'm actively listening to you to hear not just what you're saying, but how you're saying it, the excitement on your voice when you talk about certain things, about reading, what your father said to you. Do not listen to interject. Listen to understand. That is a key soft skill. So if I had one thing to say on this call, listen to understand.
Fantastic. Wow. I'm really enjoying this. I hope you guys are. So I want to ask about, so I talked about career paths and where people should go. So someone is already in a career, they're starting out. What do you think they should be thinking of? And I'm not saying they should leave their job, but what should they be thinking of in terms of career paths?
This word is interesting, career. When I give talks now and I'm invited to talk and things, I will say to people, do you want a job or do you want a career? The two things are very different. Okay. A job, you earn money, you turn up, you do what you have to do. A career is something that usually has longevity and it will be with you, could be 20, 30, 40 years. And the two approaches are very different because if you want a career, you have to be very strategic now to keep it going because many jobs will end after 1 or 2 years. What do I mean by that? You could be in Whitehall in the civil service. And I was in Whitehall when we had 5 prime ministers. Departments were opening and closing or merging because prime ministers were changing and policy and legislation was changing. When I got headhunted to the private sector, everything was being driven by share price. If the share price went down, people would lose their jobs. If a contract was lost, people would lose their jobs. So you have to be aware very politically, if you want a career, what is happening in the big picture. If Keir Starmer is talking, and I normally say this to civil servants because my target market, if he's making announcements at party conferences about legislation, in addition to the King's speech, what is he actually saying? So, for example, they talked about winter fuel allowance being taken away. People could apply for those different things. I said to civil servants in DWP, that's where the jobs are.
Hmm.
Think about what is being announced. Have an antennae politically. When you work in the private sector, my first job was a construction PLC company, and they were heavily invested in high speed 2. Rishi Sunak said, I'm not doing high speed 2. We were heavily exposed. We're talking billions. It was a PLC company. I was head of public affairs. And this has a massive impact on a company if they're exposed. When he makes announcements that he's not doing electric cars, private sector supply chain is 5, 10 years ahead. So what government says matters in the private sector. So if you're in the private sector, you still need to be listening to what government's saying. And I've been on both sides of the fence doing public affairs, communications, policy. And you really need to be listening to those quite parliamentary questions, the party conferences, which I've attended when I did public affairs, but you can see the readout on that on the news. If you really want to hear what's happening in select committees, there's a thing called Hansard. It does all the transcribing of everything you talked about legislation at the top of this podcast. To see how that plays out in select committees, look at Hansard.
Right. How do you spell that?
HANSARD.
I think I've seen that. Yeah. Hybrid
That
too.
will tell you about decisions.
Yeah,
How,
hybrid have that.
yeah. So it's where basically Parliament keep a record of everything that's said and every decision made because they have to. We have a thing called Freedom of Information Act. You can have access to these things. So if you're somebody who wants to be involved in legislation, wants to be involved in select committees, wants to understand how people arrive at decisions, like Stella said at the top of the hour, we want to be at the table. You need to understand how they do business. So have a look at that. So having been in government, I've seen that. So when I was headhunted to help private sector understand government, those are the things I would rely on to say, okay, if we're going to be looking at bidding for this, or you're actually invested or exposed in this market, let's look what government's saying about that to understand what policies they may bring out or how they might change things. So be politically aware if you have a career.
And a way to empower yourself as well. Be empowered. Don't
You
leave.
need
I hear a lot from my, God bless everyone, when people talk about how things are being done. Not someone that sits, I don't like to grumble about things. I like to make my own little changes, no matter how little. No matter, it's like, I feel that it's like a trickle. You make your own
Yeah.
little, you do your own thing in your own little world, and maybe it will trickle somewhere else, as opposed to, because there's unfairness everywhere. We know that for sure. You know that things are is going on. But just make your own little change. Or if you want to make a big change, why not?
You can get involved in campaigns. You can actually make the members bill and you can get 100,000 signatures or put it on the floor. So you can join campaigns, you can volunteer, you can join what they call all party parliamentary groups, which are really about the public. You can go and attend those. And there's a all party, they call them APPGs, that anyone can join a subject that they're interested in. It could be trolling, online safety, whatever. And you could listen to the debates. So Google APPGs, see the subject that you're interested in. And if you want to attend, ask to attend as an observer. If you want to get involved, be part of the secretariat, people are always looking for volunteers.
Fantastic. Look at that. We're getting so much. What do you think are the biggest mistakes professionals make when trying to position themselves? Especially we're in a digital world now, and the job market is digitally driven.
Oh,
What are the mistakes that professionals make?
I think what you do is so brilliant. You said to me at the top of the hour, you look at creativity and tech. Okay. And I think sometimes we go too far one way or the other. We need to embrace both. So you are so opposite in what you're saying. So for example, now we have to have a digital footprint. If you're a professional who's serious about their career, who's not just looking for a job just to pay bills and pay a mortgage or rent, you want a long-term career, you need to have a digital footprint. I've been headhunted a lot of times. It's because of my profile on LinkedIn. People look me up. Oh, and it's there. So what I say to people in my talks, no sign is a sign of no business. You need to have a brand. You need to embrace that technical side of your life, whatever job you do. And I was in policy and communications. I'm not technically gifted at all, but I knew I had to have a digital footprint. So I had a LinkedIn profile. I did a LinkedIn page, and I've got guides on that. You know, how to make your LinkedIn page, turn it into a landing page. You don't need a website. You could use LinkedIn for free and just do some tweaking. And when people are searching for people, headhunters, because that's what recruiters do, they use these ways to search, you'll come up and they can look at your CV straight away and see what's going on. So it isn't enough just to also list your jobs. When I coach people, I'm working with one lady now, I won't say her name, who wants to work internationally. I said, then we have to translate your CV to talk internationally. And I know what that means because I've been head of India for the government. So there's not just about listing your goal. What are you actually going for? What do you want to do? You have to be intentional about every step you're taking. And then your profile, your brand has to represent and reflect that. So some mistakes people make is they don't have any digital footprint. They feel they don't need it. They do, unless you're world famous and that people will hire you anyway. Everyone needs to promote themselves. Or they're too creative where they do it and they don't actually put down technical skills or the things that they're actually good at. What is your offer? So you have to marry the two, like you've said, Stella, and really have a congruent offer. And that word congruence is key because what you say about yourself has to match up with your experience.
That's interesting. So footprints. That's good. And LinkedIn has such a large, we talked about SEO, search engine optimization. I think the episode 13, when I spoke to Abidemi Sanusi, we talked about, so LinkedIn has a big SEO, meaning that if you put things in there and you do your profile properly, then likely that when your name comes up, it will come up from LinkedIn because it's got a large base. So that's a good one. And if you want to have your own home, depending on what kind of business you're in, maybe if you're an entrepreneur, then you probably have to have your website along. You don't want to be in someone's home without your own home. Have a website.
Yes. But you can start somewhere, Senna, and LinkedIn is a good starting place. Not all of us can afford a website or even know how to do it, but each one teach one. Going on LinkedIn, like you and I were speaking today about how you can help me with certain things I want to do by joining a WhatsApp group. LinkedIn is like that as well. It's like a big WhatsApp group. You can get so much information and knowledge from what people are doing and just look around and see how other people are doing their things. And what I would say to you, yes, websites are good. They have their place. But if you can't afford one or you don't have the time to do one, just do LinkedIn to start. Make it a landing page. There's another thing called Linktree, which I use. Again, because it's a backup to my LinkedIn page. I can put my offers there and I can link in because people definitely will usually want a website for you to have on LinkedIn. But my LinkedIn is so comprehensive. It has all my experience, why I do what I do. It has everywhere I've worked. It has everything on it. And I don't mean it in a boring chronological way. You make it a story and interesting, something about you. Yes, I think there's a risk because LinkedIn is a third party that could disappear, but you could have a link tree to back up. And I don't think LinkedIn will disappear. But if I'm saying for those of us who can't and don't want to manage a website, there has to be another way. So I'm just saying that's the starting point. Start where you are with what you have.
Yeah, it's a good one. So I think you talked about, because you mentioned it about someone who was looking for internationally. So we have remote work, although now
Yeah.
they're encouraging people to go back to work maybe 2 or 3 days a week. And it's not just in the UK because we're talking from the UK, everywhere else. So how if you're like looking for work internationally, how can you stand out as a job seeker? If it's international, if it's not in the
Okay. Yeah. So again, when I was coaching this lady, I said I went through her CV line by line. So we have to pick out the things that will speak to an international market. So for example, this particular lady is looking at a project management role. Luckily, she'd worked in departments where she had worked on international trade. So those are things I was focused on to say we need to do some branding around that on LinkedIn. So when I talk to people about their CVs, it's also their brand. And so how are we going to sell that part of you? So if somebody's looking at an international role, they can see, oh, this person has actually done this work and there's a tangential link to what I want to do. I can see how she could be useful in XYZ market. So it's about teasing out those things, those transferable skills, depending on what market you want to work in, why you want to do it, because there's so many jobs. When I worked as head of India, I was looking at policy and government spending. You could be doing either assessor for the government and there are people doing commercial projects for the government, helping to build hospitals abroad. There's so many different skills. There might be diplomacy skills, working in the British High Commission, doing diplomatic work. There's so many jobs. So I think, and I'm not selling myself, but you need to find somebody like a coach to talk with to say, okay, this is what I want to do. And they will look at that specific pathway for you and the skills and things that you need to bring out and talk about and the way that you need to do it. And that's why the job I have today really relies heavily on my skill base, which was policy and communications. I know how to communicate an offer, which I had to do when I was writing policy. And that's stood me in good stead, helping people when they have to communicate their offer to employers, or it could be in their own job. They just want more of the job that they've got. Not everybody wants to leave and get another job. This particular lady I'm working with doesn't actually want promotion. She just wants a more interesting job. So there are many reasons why people work with a coach. It isn't all about promotion and getting more money. It's just even building confidence, and we're tackling imposter syndrome or many things.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask you about how, because of course I don't think you're seeing your clients face to face. So how are you using technology in your job itself?
This
Any
is,
kind of technology?
yes, I'm a remote worker. Technology has changed my life, and I've come to this late. I'm not somebody like you, Sally, who's technically gifted. It's something I've had to learn about. So Zoom, and I use Teams at work, and I'm just using it now, remote working, like I'm with how we're talking now. I will do some conferences when I'm asked to speak in person, but normally it's a webinar. It's talking to people on a Google Hangout meeting, and they can see me, I can see them, or even just on the phone. Depending on what I worked with, one lady who was in private office of a very senior official in government, and she could only speak at 8 to 8:30 in the morning on a Friday. And it was just a quick phone call, just to touching on what she had to hit on in terms of managing this team. And so I give that technology. Yes, it's good to have all of this, Teams, Zoom, all of that kind of stuff, Google.
Old
Uh,
fashioned.
but also just the good old fashioned telephone. I need to speak to somebody, I'll speak with them. And sometimes just to give people a lower cost, I'll do a quick phone call just to help them over something. So I think you use it interchangeably with whatever the circumstance. But it's changed my life to work remotely, to not have to commute like I had done for decades, and that I can actually share my experience online. And I've done webinars for up to 500 people online internationally, because I'm now doing private sector clients where they've actually asked me to do at Christmas 2 time zones. I had to get up 7 in the morning to do the North, and then South America, it was in the afternoon. But the private sector company wanted everybody around globally to listen to this message. It's a staff engagement. It's about personal growth, mentoring, coaching. And so I ended up working on different time zones now, but it's all digitally. And I was able to speak to people. I remember on the calls at Christmas with people in Australia. It was just from around the world patched in with this private sector company. And it was amazing. So the
God,
power of technology is bringing global, local.
it seems so exciting. My goodness. I'm sure you're enjoying the job.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. So I was talking about AI and automation are changing job roles. How? Yeah. There's a lot of fear around
Mhm.
it taking jobs. AI has been around for a while. It's been around for a while. And I'll cite a very basic example in the UK. I can't talk for anywhere else. Where we go to the supermarkets now, we have self checkouts.
Mm.
We have self checkout. We used to have a whole line, especially if you go to the massive big supermarkets where you have all of the cash deals and you have people behind those cash deals taking your money, checking out your food or your groceries. Now you have self checkouts and maybe 1 or 2 of those cash deals working at any one time.
Mhm.
The question I ask is, what has happened to those jobs? Have they transitioned those jobs to shelving, or are those jobs gone? And most the people that are doing those jobs are people who maybe had been maybe mothers who had their children, maybe they just working part-time around their children, or older people who want that as part-time work, or different kind of people have those jobs. So that I'm just citing that as a basic example. I'm not even going to go higher than that. What has happened to those jobs? Because that's AI taking those jobs. But where
And that's a reality. So I'll give you another example then, just to crystallize that. The miners' strike happened decades ago in this country. because pits were closed down. And the reason I know about that, later on when I did my master's in urban regeneration and I started working in local government, it was looking at local enterprise partnerships. And I remember doing something in Derbyshire County where mining had closed down and whole areas had been left unemployed, and for decades, because no new skills had been learned. And in Derbyshire, the biggest employer at the time was Toyota Cars, and everybody was relying on that car manufacturer to give them a job because previous generations had been in mines and they were closed by government. People said they want clean technology. It's interesting now they want to open up some of these things again, but at the time that's what happened. But the issue then, and when the government started to look into this, and when went into central government and they started to look into some of these areas, they realized that they hadn't given anything to replace it with. So your hypothesis is a really good one. What's happened to these jobs? Without training, people's lives are impacted terribly. And government is been on the back foot with industrial revolution, mining and everything else, where we had strikes, we had riots in this country because people had lost their livelihoods overnight. And that wasn't because of AI. It was just because automation, things had changed. They wanted clean technology. They didn't want old technology. Now they're talking about AI taking jobs. It's the same principle. Government have to train. And we cannot wait for government to train us. We have to work with people like you, Stella, and look at what's available out there. Look at the free courses on LinkedIn. There's a lot of free webinars and training as well already out there, and small price things that you can pay for to look at AI and ChatGPT. And there's some really good women companies aim to grow, different companies offering masterclasses for women business owners in particular to get them up on AI. And I think people like yourself, Stella, who you're also talking about doing webinars, these are the kind of people we need to be tapping into, people like you that we can learn from. My mantra is each one, teach one. So I think everyone has to pick up new skills, something I've done in my whole career. I'm learning the whole time. Like a camel, you've got to keep taking on water, keep going and learning. And if the government is not available, find people that can help you online. Look at LinkedIn is a really good place to start. That's why I say it's like a massive WhatsApp for me. I love it so much. And I think that's why I'm growing my following, because I just like interacting with it. And you learn so much from it. So I'm not saying those shopkeepers can jump on LinkedIn, but there might be something that they can go to in their local college or what have you to say, look, I need to learn some new skills here. And it may be that those automation jobs becoming automated, they might be doing things online on the telephone. So for example, government are increasing their helpline for HMRC to help people with their tax returns. People may have to retrain and go into different areas. And a lot of those people work from home that are on the government helplines. So there's flexibility in that. There's different things out there and people need to look at that. And don't be afraid of learning new skills at any age. And I've doing this in my 50s.
So that leads me to what we've got now. So we no longer have job for life. We have
No.
careers. So maybe just explain to people what a portfolio career is like.
Right.
Doing. Can you please enlighten
Yeah.
on what that means?
So there's no job for life. There's no golden watch after when you're age 60. And people are working beyond that now anyway. Portfolio career is quite an interesting one. And a career is something you have to manage. So that's if you work for somebody, remember the job can change because of geopolitical pressures, policies, the company's share price can drop, your job could go overnight. So a couple of things, your job is not your family. Remember that. It's a transaction. You're paid for your service. If your service is no longer required, you are not required. No one will give you a job because they like you. So a lot of people are now going into what they call portfolio working. They have different strings to their bow. They don't just have their day job. They have something that they're really interested. My son, for example, does PR. He loves that. He also does his music thing on the side because he loves that too. People are not one-dimensional. We're multifaceted. If you're caring for your children at home, I know people are doing skincare business from home, launching that, talking about different things to do with children's clothing. The AI and technology can help you build an online business. You could have an online shop overnight. So I think it's a portfolio career is finding things that you're interested in Whether that, so you have your job, you have different passions. When I was doing coaching and mentoring in addition to my job for years, I just wasn't being paid for it because I had a job. I did it as a volunteer. By the time I decided to leave my corporate career in June 2024, I already had clients who wanted to pay me because of all of the extra work I'd been doing over the years in the background for free. I already had my brand out there, that this was something I wanted to do. And then when I realized, actually, I don't want to do corporate anymore, literally, I just presented myself on LinkedIn and said, I'm now available. And I got clients. I'm
Oh,
busy. I actually turn away clients. And
so
so this is what I'm saying. Find what you want to do. We talked about in this podcast about your passions and start to build small businesses around that, your interests. There's 24 hours in a day. We sleep 6, 7 hours a day. Our kids are at school. If you have children at school age, they're at school or at university. You have time. Instead of maybe watching EastEnders or something, you could be doing a little business, doing something on your own. And that way you have a portfolio career. Another thing that people do, they become non-executive directors if they're in the executive space, trustees and things like that. But that's becoming saturated. Everybody wants one of these kind of side gigs. So what I'm saying is create your own job. That's what portfolio career is. You can make your own small jobs on the side. You can create your own portfolio.
and there's quite a lot of even YouTube, as much as YouTube is full of, if you're looking for things, at least the starting point, it might be, I'll call it like, what would I call it? Melting pot.
Yeah.
It's got a melting pot of things, but there's some strands of things that you can starting points. You want to learn something, start
No,
there, and then take it away and start then seeing what more you can learn. So it's a starting point.
it
Um,
is.
but it's lifelong learning. You can never stop. And it's the exciting thing in the world we're coming up to is things you might not even think, but somebody wants what you know.
Yeah.
Somebody care for what you know. You
It,
what you take for
yeah.
granted, what somebody else will pay you for. Trust me, I know. Because I work as a technical writer, but I'm a crime fiction author and I've been writing for a long time. And people want to say, okay, teach us what's
Yeah.
my area, come and talk to us what, and that was just it's just my passion project.
Yeah.
Passion.
And that's like passion projects. And I love what you said. Everyone has a niche. You are your own niche because you're individual. So I started off with my story, second generation Windrush. Everyone's got the story. So I'm a champion of social mobility. That's my brand, champion of women. I'm a UN woman, delegate, volunteer. But you've got your own story, your own thing that you're interested in. You've talked about being a technical writer. You've talked about tech and the creativity and the intersection. We've all got our own niche and brand, and you can sell that skill.
Absolutely. And get people to teach you, get people to talk to you.
Yeah,
Yeah. Always seek for people that will be able to give you that will be, well, people would know more. I know people who know more than me, and I'm so more than happy to learn.
exactly.
So I want to ask a question about, do you think there's a difference in how women and people from ethnic minority backgrounds should approach personal branding and visibility, or is it the same for everyone?
No, it's not because we are underrepresented. I always talked about gender equality. People talk about gender equality, glass ceiling. I think for Black women, it's a concrete ceiling. And it has been for decades. It's opening up now. Some people are breaking that ceiling, but it's very few and far between. So you have to be, again, very intentional with what you're doing. You cannot just go out there and be extra uber political because we have still these tropes about Black women being angry, etc. And you don't want to be labeled as an angry Black woman or whatever. I've built up a following on LinkedIn because I've been quite careful actually. So if I've seen something around George Floyd or what have you, I don't go on a rant about race equality. I talk about maybe Martin Luther King and the fact that he was somebody there for peace and we need to bring back peace. So there's oblique ways that you can comment on something without coming out the gate directly because we are scrutinized more. We are looked upon more closely. And that's not going to change. We're still a minority in this country. What, 8, 9% ethnic minorities. So you cannot assume that you can just, I think, be yourself, but have common sense about it and do not be inflammatory on any platform, whether you're Black or white. But I think for a Black person, I've always thought that we have to be a, do a little bit more navigation because of these stereotypes that unfortunately still exist.
Oh, oh gosh. Many people struggle with imposter syndrome in high-powered careers. I've heard even celebrities have heard that, and
Mm.
I know a bit. I know a bit of it because when I started out, I felt like an imposter because I just felt, especially when it came to speaking. Not that I couldn't speak, but I just thought because I had an accent, I couldn't get rid of it.
Yeah.
So I just felt that nobody would want to listen to me. But then in the end, my love of speaking won
Mhm.
out. So how do you coach clients through that feeling? What is your advice to people?
Again, when people talk to me about imposter syndrome, which essentially is I don't feel good enough or I don't belong here, always look at your skills and what brought you here. Nobody employs you for no reason. And you talked about me being resilient. One of the things that's helped me when I felt imposter syndrome going into certain jobs, working with Old Boys Network, people had been to Russell Group's universities, where I'd been to a university that was first a polytechnic that turned into a university, was that I remembered what got me here and the skills that I have and the unique understanding I have because I grew up in South London in a council house. I had things that I knew about people that they would never know. And I took my difference as a superpower and it was made me more agile and have greater understanding about things. So I think sometimes when we think we're less than, we have to remember why we're more. And we have to remember what got us here and the hills that we've already traveled to be here. Because you don't just land, you've arrived after traveling quite a way. So when you're in a job and you feel, gosh, I don't belong here, look at what got you here to begin with. No one employs you for no reason. Look at your skill set, look at the previous achievements, and remember why you were here. And even if you have to put the letters after your name, and I know a lot of us in our community do that, but that makes us feel better, do it. I don't think you should overdo it. But I remember my sister said to me once when I was in a particularly challenging posting in government, put your letters after your name. And it changed things overnight. I wasn't here because I was tokenistic higher. I was here because I had a degree, master's, fellowship, fellow of institutes. I had all these extracurricular qualifications. So I have never stopped studying. I'm commercially trained, project management trained, policy communications. I have all of these qualifications. And I started to drop that into conversation. I'm here on merit. I'm here because I can do the job.
So what's the best career advice you've ever received?
I think it's be yourself because there is only one you. So don't try and be anybody else. And I think the reason I say that is even though I'm saying we have to navigate a bit more, we are so unique. And I think, especially I'm talking for ethnic minorities, I think because we've had extra challenges to deal with, we have so many richer experiences. To be ourselves and don't hide that. Don't hide and dumb down. I love the fact that I talk about I'm second generation Windrush. It's actually part of my brand, social mobility. People know me for that. I get asked, did you talk all the time about things like this? So be you. And the other thing I would say is do not be afraid to ask for help and mentoring. I know this podcast is ending soon, but what I would say is find yourself a mentor and find yourself a coach. And if you can't find yourself a coach, get yourself a mentor. Because in every job I've been to, I've taken on teaching, not just me taking courses. I've been mentored. And when I was in the private sector, I had 3 mentors. And a lot of those people you can get through your professional organizations. For example, I was a member of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations. I've been a member of the Chartered Institute of Management. There are mentors, there are fellows that will give you back mentoring. And they gave it to me for free when I was going to my first party conference outside government. And I was there representing a PLC company to government after being in government. I had mentors helping me with that process, that transition. And I had a guy that flew in who was heading up his public affairs in Scotland, met me at the party conferences in one of the suites that they had for businesses. I said, Sandra, how are you getting on? Taking me through my steps. And I can do this. So find people you can talk to. And there are plenty of people out there, lots of help out there.
So don't feel alone. So I want to talk about, because I know you worked in inclusion and all that, and we know there's a lot going on in the States at the moment.
Yeah.
Without looking too much at what is going on, what do you think do you think that there will be changes here? Because sometimes people say when there are changes in the States, the UK follows. I'm
And
hoping.
that's true. That does normally happen. But isn't it interesting, without getting too political, that Starmer has already done a divergence with Trump with the Ukraine policy. So he's already signaled that he's willing to be different. And having worked in Whitehall, I'm starting to understand a lot more of their thought process. And he's obviously coming out the gate saying, yes, I want to work with Trump. He wants to be the bridge, he says, between the Europe and America. But he's not necessarily going to agree with America. And I think he's already signaled that. So I still listen to what he has to say because I'm no longer in Whitehall, but I listen to what they have to say because what they say matters. It's dictating all our policies and everything going on around us. And the DEI is a big thing now because America, a lot of them have thrown the policies out the window. I do not believe Starmer will do that because he's already signaled that he's willing to challenge him to Trump. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. We're at the beginning of that conversation. He may capitulate and decide to bring in some things, but we have a very different history here. And even though we have fought to have our Race Relations Act strengthened and those laws are strengthened, we are very strong on rights for LGBT. We're really tolerant society in many ways. And some parts of America is not. So I just think we're quite a different society here. And I don't think Starmer would come in on this platform of inclusivity and dismantle that, where Trump was always very clear that he didn't like that agenda. He's called it being woke, which is what the opposition party, the Tory party, is saying. They want to get rid of all of this woke stuff. So I think Starmer has departed from some of his manifesto things, and those are things that people should read. I'm an ex-policy person, so I do read manifestos, but he hasn't departed fully. The jury's still out. It's an emerging conversation. I think that's probably something to come back to still on a future podcast in 6 months' time. And let's see where we are.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back because I think just to tease out more for the future. So
Yeah.
I'll follow a different tack. I want to follow your interests. Before we're going to be wrapping up soon.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
want to follow your interest because I know you showed interest in writing. So what are your plans for the future? That different facets of you, and you want to develop those aspects.
Yeah, I want to write children's books. And the reason being, again, when we spoke earlier, there was so much synergy because you said you read voraciously growing up. I love language, English language, and I actually like old English. So when I went into Whitehall and they started speaking Latin, I actually enjoyed it because I would look up the words and everything. I never went to a private school, but I like the old ways of talking. And English has been my calling card into better jobs. So understanding language, I've always taught my son to read wide books, Shakespeare, everything from A to Z. So as a child, I read a lot of children's books, the Alice in Wonderland, Chronicles of Narnia, etc. And because I grew up so poor, it was the one place I could go to and escape and travel without paying for any. So I want to help other children to travel through the books, just as I did, because that was where I could go, the library. My mum always used to say, go to the library, it's free. And that's where I want to start. And then I also want to talk about my journey in a sort of memoir, just to help people because I picked up a lot of things along the way. When I say on LinkedIn, I'm sharing lessons learned. That's exactly what I'm doing as part of my business. So I do coaching, but I also speak and webinars, and people say, oh, can we talk about personal growth? That's come up quite a bit for me. And I just talk about what helped me to grow in my career and what helped me to pivot and why I'm helping others. So I really want to, there comes a time when you're learning and comes a time when you're teaching. And I think I'm approaching that time where I'm teaching more through posts on LinkedIn, my newsletter, and just sharing insights into things that help me to progress in life.
Yeah. I love that. I love the fact that you're passing on your experience and knowledge. We don't want all that to be wasted. I wanted to ask about how do you balance your work now and just balance everything so that it's all holistic?
Very good question, actually. And I'm so lucky now because having grown up so poor and disadvantaged, where I was doing nighttime study, working full time, I'm now working part time. And the beauty of going back into using technology is because I don't have to travel anywhere. Very rare now I travel unless I want to. And I can work on the beach. I can work abroad. It's so beautiful now, live, because technology has done that for me. So I'm coming back into your sweet spot, Stella, ending this call on that, because without that, I wouldn't have had the life I have today.
Mm.
So my skills, I've been able to package them. I have an online business and I'm working remotely. And as I said, I do go to some studios and some of the talks I've done with the civil service, when I'm doing conferences with the civil service. They said, Sandra, could you come into a London studio? Which I did because there were so many people on the call. They didn't want me to do it at home in case the line went down or something. So I did have to go into the London studio. But normally I'm at home and then I go to the gym. I'm doing weight training as most women should be doing now, especially after age 40, because you lose bone strength. I'm walking, I'm hiking, I'm seeing friends, family. I saw my son yesterday in London in Farringdon at his work. I was there, able to meet him, go for a walk around London. Life is so different from where it started because I've been intentional the whole way through. I knew I wanted to get here. So when I was in the rain wearing shoes that were so thin on the soles that water would come through, and I was studying at night and walking miles to a train station to save money, I am now part-time, remote, traveling and earning enough money to live from an online business. And that's about being intentional.
Well done. That's fantastic. I've got more question. I'm not going to end it. So, do you have any? I always ask all my guests this. Any? I know you're passionate about so many things. Is there anything else you're passionate about that you do that you love and love? Like mine is to eat my way around the world.
Ah,
You do in the future. Mine. I'm passionate about culture, about other culture, and just food.
oh, I think it's a good one. I'm passionate about learning about other cultures because I grew up quite disadvantaged. I never started traveling until later. So I went to the Gulf at Christmas, to Dubai.
Mm.
I went to Qatar, went to the museum. It's beautiful to see Islamic culture. I've never seen that in a museum. And it was so amazing. Abu Dhabi, I was on a cruise and it docked at these different places. It was wonderful. I was in Kenya on safari last year with my son for his birthday. And we were at the Masai Mara. We traveled 7 hours out of Nairobi and did this safari thing going on. So I think for me, what I'm excited about is travel, seeing more of the world that I didn't get to see because I couldn't afford to see it. Now I can do a bit more. And my son is working. He's through the worst, as we say. He's graduated and working. So he's now taking on water, taking on that knowledge I'm telling you about. So he's telling me, relax, mommy, let me do some of the heavy lifting for you now. So I am relaxing more and traveling more. And I want to to see, be in the Masamara of my son, to go around the Gulf, places I haven't been before. I've done the Caribbean, I guess I've done Europe, but I want to go places that I haven't been. And Kenya was on my hit list. And it was such a beautiful experience to celebrate my son's birthday out there. So I think eating around the world, but traveling definitely around the world.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Now I know that you're on LinkedIn, so I'm not going to say where can people reach you because just you tell us anyway. Tell us.
I'm on LinkedIn at Sandra Johnson. And the only letters I use after my name is FCMI, it's Fellow Child Management Institute. But yeah, do search for me on LinkedIn. And I have a lot of following now, so I'll come up straight away. And I also have my own link tree, which is also linked to my LinkedIn. And my guides are there. And do check out the skills guide, which is free. Because I wanted to do things that I always think you have to give before you ask for anything. And I think giving some of your knowledge away is a really good way of helping people as well. So the soft skills guide, because it helped me, I just thought, let me do that first for free. And then the other guides I've done are low cost, like £5 or £10, because I want to reach the maximum amount of people. People like myself who are starting out didn't have much money. And I want to still reach that audience. So I don't coach senior execs. I coach ordinary people because I want them to get from A to B because I remember where I was. So the guides I've done is just to help people just to pick up something. If you can't afford that website, just do your landing page on LinkedIn, do whatever you can just to get started and just go for it.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Really talking to us today. It's been amazing. So many things to unpack. Anybody, I'm going to just make sure most people watch this because they will learn so much from it. And look, if you're watching or listening to this, go and listen and review, because if you review, that helps me to continue with this podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, and subscribe. Subscribe to the channel. It's a new channel. I'm still adding things to it, but go and subscribe, like it, and all that so that we can grow, because I really want to continue with this. So thank you so much, Sandra.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. That did. Yeah, I'll cut that off anyway.